The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by intelligent beings. It stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction, with ceilings so high that clouds sometimes formed inside on humid days. The walls were covered with banners representing 312 spacefaring civilizations, each one older and more powerful than the last. Some of these species had been traveling between stars when Earth was still a ball of molten rock. Ambassador Daniel Cole stood at the small podium reserved for newly admitted species. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady hands, chosen specifically because he did not frighten easily. The diplomatic corps back on Earth had spent 6 months preparing him for this moment, teaching him the customs and protocols of dozens of alien races. They had warned him about the condescension he would face. They had told him to stay calm no matter what happened. None of that preparation felt adequate now. The beings around him were enormous. The Zin delegation sat directly in front of him, their insect-like bodies covered in dark exoskeletons that gleamed under the chamber lights. Each one stood nearly 4 meters tall and weighed more than a small car. Their compound eyes reflected Daniel's image back at him hundreds of times over, to his left. The Corvathi floated in their environmental pods. They were translucent creatures that looked like jellyfish made of light, and they communicated through patterns of color that rippled across their bodies. To his right, the Eldari watched with their elongated faces and silver eyes, their expressions impossible to read. Daniel cleared his throat and began to speak. The human delegation formally requests a revision to the current trade agreements, he said, keeping his voice steady and professional. The tariffs imposed on Earth goods have made it impossible for our outer colonies to sustain themselves. We are not asking for special treatment. We are simply asking for the same terms that are offered to other member species. High Counselor Varoth, of the Zin hegemony, made a sound that Daniel had learned was laughter. It was a wet, clicking noise that came from deep within his throat, and it echoed through the chamber like stones rattling in a metal container. The young species makes demands, Vareth said. His voice was deep and resonant, translated through the universal communicator embedded in Daniel's ear. Tell me, Ambassador, how long has humanity been among the stars? 40 of your years? 50? 43 years since our first successful faster-than-light journey, Daniel replied. 43 years. Vareth turned to address the assembly, his massive arms spread wide. The Zin hegemony built our first orbital stations when human ancestors were still learning to plant seeds in the ground. We have been a spacefaring civilization for 600,000 years. And this species, this infant among nations, wishes to negotiate as though they were our equals. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Daniel watched as hundreds of alien delegates nodded or made gestures of approval. The Corvathi delegation pulsed with colors that his translator interpreted as amusement and contempt. Delegate Siren of the Corvathi collective spoke next, her voice like wind chimes in a storm. Perhaps the humans should focus on learning the proper protocols before making requests of this council. They barely understand the principles behind faster-than-light travel. They cannot construct their own jump gates. They rely entirely on technology purchased or borrowed from more advanced civilizations. And yet they come here asking us to change rules that have served the galaxy well for 60,000 years. We are not asking you to change the rules, Daniel said, struggling to keep the frustration out of his voice. We are asking you to apply them fairly. The tariffs on human goods are 300%, higher than those applied to any other species at our development level. The restrictions on our shipping lanes add weeks to every journey. The quotas on our mining operations make it impossible to gather the resources we need to grow. Lord Mevin of the Eldari Dominion rose from his seat. He was ancient, even by the standards of his long-lived species. Skin like cracked parchment and eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. When he spoke, the entire chamber fell silent. Young Ambassador, he said, his tone patient in the way that an adult might be patient with a particularly slow child. The system you complain about has functioned perfectly well for 60,000 years. It has maintained peace and prosperity across 10,000 star systems. It has prevented wars that would have destroyed entire civilizations. It will not be altered to accommodate a species that has yet to prove its worth. And how exactly are we supposed to prove our worth? Daniel asked, when the system itself prevents us from developing. Lord Mevin smiled. At least Daniel thought it was a smile. That is not our concern. Every species in this chamber faced the same challenges when they were young. Every species found a way to overcome them. If humanity cannot do the same, then perhaps humanity does not deserve a place among us. The vote was called. Daniel watched as 311 lights turned red, rejecting his proposal. Earth's single green light stood alone in a sea of rejection. High Counselor. Vareth rose from his seat and approached Daniel's podium. Up close, the Zin was even more intimidating. His mandibles clicked softly as he looked down at the human ambassador. You should not feel ashamed, Vareth said. This is the way of things. Young species must learn their place before they can hope to advance. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, when humanity has matured, we will revisit this conversation. Until then, I suggest you return to your world and focus on more realistic goals. The Zin turned away, dismissing Daniel as though he were an insect not worth crushing. Daniel gathered his documents slowly. His hands were steady, but inside, something was burning. He thought about the colonies struggling to survive on the edge of human space. He thought about the children going hungry because Earth could not afford to send enough supplies. He thought about all the promises the Council had made when humanity first joined. Promises of friendship and support and mutual growth. All of it had been lies. He walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Behind him, he could hear the delegates already moving on to other business, already forgetting that he had ever been there. At the door, he stopped. He turned back to face the assembly. High Counselor Vareth noticed the movement and looked up with obvious irritation. Is there something else, Ambassador? Daniel met the Zin's compound eyes without flinching. We will remember this day, he said. Humanity will remember how we were treated in this chamber. And I promise you, High Counselor, there will come a time when you remember it too. Vareth stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed again, that wet clicking sound that made Daniel's skin crawl. Threats from an infant, Vareth said, turning back to his fellow counselors. How amusing. How very, very amusing. The entire chamber joined in the laughter. 311 species laughing at the small human in his inadequate uniform. Laughing at his tiny world and his struggling colonies. Laughing at the very idea that humanity could ever be anything more than a minor. Footnote in galactic history, Daniel walked out of the chamber without another word. Behind him, the laughter continued, echoing off the ancient walls. Following him all the way back to his ship, he did not know exactly what would happen next. He did not know what humanity would do in response to this humiliation. But he knew with absolute certainty that the Council had made a terrible mistake. They just did not know it yet. 6 months after the vote, Earth's seat in the Council chamber was empty. High Counselor Vareth noticed the absence during the opening ceremonies of the annual summit. He scanned the rows of delegates, counting banners and checking attendance lists, and realized that the small human section had been abandoned. The chairs were empty. The displays were dark. The banner with Earth's blue and green symbol hung limp and unattended. Has anyone contacted the human delegation? He asked his assistant. Their communication channels have been closed, the assistant reported. Ambassador Cole departed the station 97 standard days ago. No replacement has been assigned. All requests for information have gone unanswered. Vareth clicked his mandibles in annoyance. Typical behavior from a primitive species. They did not get what they wanted, so now they sulk like children. They will return when they realize they have no other choice. Delegate Siren of the Korvathi agreed. Let them have their tantrum. The Council has more important matters to address. The summit continued without further discussion of humanity. There were trade disputes to resolve between the Korvathi and the Gentari collective. There were territorial negotiations with the Zin hegemony regarding their expansion into the Outer Rim. There were scientific exchanges to coordinate and cultural festivals to plan. Nobody paid attention. When human cargo ships stopped appearing at the major trading hubs, the tariffs had made trade unprofitable anyway. It made sense that humanity would reduce their commercial presence until they came to their senses. Nobody noticed when human diplomatic staff quietly packed their belongings. left the council station. They were such a small presence that their absence created barely a ripple. Other species had isolated themselves before. It was a common reaction among young civilizations when they faced disappointment. 3 months became 6. 6 became 12. Dr. Lisa Hartman was the first to raise serious concerns. She was the council's leading xenoanthropologist, specializing in the study of newly contacted species. She had spent years on Earth during humanity's brief membership in the council, walking their cities, observing their cultures, studying their history. She understood humans better than almost anyone in the galaxy. Something about this silence felt wrong to her. She requested a meeting with the security committee, bringing with her months of research and analysis. The committee met in a small chamber adjacent to the main hall, with representatives from the Zin, the Korvathi, the Eldari, and several other major powers. The humans have gone completely quiet, Lisa explained, displaying her data on the chamber's holographic projectors. No diplomatic communications, no trade vessels, no scientific exchanges. Even their deep space probes have been recalled to Earth space. In 18 months, we have received exactly 0 transmissions from human territory. As expected, Lord Mevin said, examining the data with obvious boredom. They are isolating themselves. It is a common reaction from primitive species when faced with their own inadequacy. They retreat to their homeworld, nurse their wounded pride, and eventually return when hunger or necessity drives them to it. I have seen it happen dozens of times over my lifetime. With respect, Lord Mevon, Lisa replied. Humanity has never behaved like other species. I have studied their history extensively. When faced with overwhelming opposition, they do not retreat. They do not accept defeat. They adapt. They innovate. They find another way. What other way could there possibly be? Vareth asked. They are a single-system civilization with technology 3,000 years behind the galactic standard. They do not have the resources to be independent. They do not have the knowledge to improve their position. They do not have any options except the ones we choose to give them. Lisa hesitated. She had been wrestling with this question for months, and she still did not have a satisfactory answer. I do not know exactly what they are doing, but that uncertainty concerns me more than anything else. Throughout human history, the most dangerous moments have come when their enemies assumed they had no options left. You are being dramatic, Siren said. The humans are simply throwing a tantrum. When their food supplies run low and their colonies begin to fail, they will come crawling back to this council, begging for the scraps we choose to give them. It is inevitable. The committee thanked Lisa for her input and moved on to the next item on their agenda. Her concerns were noted in the official record and promptly forgotten, but Lisa could not forget. She began spending her nights reviewing human history, searching for patterns that might predict their behavior. She read about their wars and their revolutions. She studied the way they had overcome challenges that should have destroyed them. She learned about their industrial revolution, their space race, their stubborn refusal to accept limitations. One phrase kept appearing in her research, repeated throughout human history in 100 different contexts. Necessity is the mother of invention. Humans did not accept impossible situations. When faced with walls, they built ladders. When faced with oceans, they built ships. When faced with the void of space, they built rockets that carried them to other worlds. What would they build now? Lisa tried to share her concerns with anyone who would listen. She wrote reports and submitted them to council committees. She requested additional resources for surveillance of human space. She argued that the council should at least attempt to re-establish communication before the situation deteriorated further. Nobody listened. The great powers of the galaxy had spent millions of years building the current order. They had seen young species come and go. They had watched civilizations rise and fall. They could not imagine that anything humanity did could possibly matter to beings as ancient and powerful as themselves. And so the silence continued, in the darkness between stars. Far from council sensors and prying eyes, something was changing. Human ships moved through uncharted systems. Human engineers worked in secret facilities. Human scientists pushed the boundaries of known physics. The Council saw none of it. 20-3 months after humanity's departure, a Korvathi research station on the edge of explored space detected something strange. An energy signature unlike anything in their databases. A construction project of impossible scale in a system that had been empty. Just months before, the station commander reviewed the data 3 times before he believed it. Then he sent an emergency transmission to the Council. His colors flickering with emotions his translator could not identify. The message was simple. The humans are back. And they have been busy. Nobody was laughing anymore. The distress signal reached Captain Nathan Blake while his survey vessel was mapping a quiet region of the Outer Territories. He was drinking coffee in his cabin when the alert came through, and the urgency in the signal made him spill half of it across his desk. "Captain, to the bridge," his communications officer called. "Priority 1 transmission from Korvathi Research Station 12. They are requesting immediate assistance." Nathan was on his feet before she finished speaking. He reached the bridge in under a minute, his uniform still stained with coffee, and dropped into the command chair. "What have we got?" "The Korvathi are asking for immediate evacuation," Lieutenant Maria Santos reported from the communications console. "The station commander says they have detected something and need to leave the area as quickly as possible." "Detected what? An asteroid? A spatial anomaly?" Maria shook her head, her dark eyes confused. "He keeps saying something about humans, Captain, but that does not make any sense. We are 40,000 light-years from Earth. There has never been a human presence in this region." Nathan frowned. He had served in the Council fleet for 15 years and had never heard of humans operating this far from their home system. They did not have the technology for long-range travel. They did not have the resources for distant exploration. They barely had enough ships to patrol their own borders. "Yes!" "Set a course for the research station," he ordered. "Maximum speed. And tell the Korvathi, we are on our way." The journey took 4 hours. When they arrived, Nathan found the station's crew in a state of barely controlled panic. The Korvathi were not a species prone to fear. They had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts and wars that lasted millennia. But the researchers on Station 12 looked terrified. The station commander was a senior scientist named Vethis. His translucent body flickered with colors that Nathan's translator struggled to interpret, cycling rapidly between shades that suggested confusion, disbelief, and raw terror. "Thank you for responding," Vethis said, leading Nathan to the station's observation center. "We thought our instruments were malfunctioning at first. We ran diagnostics for 3 days before we accepted that the readings were accurate." "What readings?" Nathan asked. Vethis pointed at the main display screen. "We detected this 72 hours ago. A system approximately 15 light-years from our position. According to Council records, it was uninhabited. No planets capable of supporting life. No resources worth harvesting. No strategic value whatsoever." The screen showed a detailed sensor analysis of the system in question. Nathan studied it carefully, his frown deepening with every piece of data. "This cannot be right," he said quietly. The system was not empty anymore. The sensors showed massive structures in orbit around the largest planet. Shipyards spanning hundreds of kilometers. Manufacturing facilities producing goods at an industrial scale that dwarfed anything Nathan had ever seen. Mining operations, extracting resources from the planet's moons with terrifying efficiency. And the energy signatures were unmistakably human. "How is this possible?" Nathan demanded. They did not have the technology for this kind of construction. They did not have the resources to build on this scale. They did not have the knowledge to develop these systems. "They have it now," Vethis replied. "We have been monitoring the site for 3 days. The construction is still ongoing. Whatever they are building, it is not finished yet." Nathan pulled up the fleet composition data. His blood ran cold as he counted the vessels. 40-7 warships of a design the database could not identify. They were sleek and angular, built with a precision that suggested technologies far beyond anything humanity had possessed 2 years ago. They moved through the system with the confidence of predators, their weapon signatures registering as unknown on every scanner. "We intercepted a communication fragment," Vethis continued. Most of it was encrypted with protocols we could not break. But one phrase kept repeating in the unencrypted portions. They called it the Independence Initiative. Nathan stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he turned to his communications officer. Send a Priority 1 transmission to Council headquarters. Include all sensor data and analysis. Mark it for immediate attention from the High Counselor's office. Yes, Captain. What should the message say? Nathan looked back at the display, at the fleet of impossible ships, at the structures that should not exist, at the evidence of a transformation that defied everything he knew about humanity. Tell them we have a problem. The transmission reached the Galactic Council within hours. The response was immediate and chaotic. High Counselor Vareth convened an emergency session. Pulling delegates from meetings and social functions across the station, the Great Hall filled rapidly, hundreds of species crowding together to see the data that Captain Blake had sent. The reaction was not what Nathan had expected. This must be a mistake, Delegate Siren insisted. The humans could not have developed this technology in such a short time. It is simply not possible. The sensor data is accurate, Vareth replied, his mandibles clicking nervously. I have had our best analysts review it. The signatures are genuine. The construction is real. The fleet exists, and someone else must be helping them, Lord, Mevin suggested. Another species? Perhaps one outside the council. The humans could not have done this alone. Our analysis suggests otherwise. Doctor! Lisa Hartman stepped forward, her expression a mixture of vindication and deep concern. The technology shows clear signs of being derived from council designs. They appear to have reverse-engineered every piece of alien hardware they acquired during their membership. Then they improved upon it significantly. Possible, Siren repeated, but her colors were flickering uncertainly now. Not impossible, Lisa replied. Just unexpected. I warned this council months ago that humanity would not simply accept their situation. I warned you that they would find another way. You chose not to listen. The chamber erupted in arguments and accusations. The Korvathi blamed the Eldari for not monitoring human development more closely. The Eldari blamed the Zin for creating the conditions that drove humanity away. The Zin blamed everyone for underestimating a species that had shown nothing but determination since the day they first reached the stars. In the midst of the chaos, a new signal cut through the chamber's communication network. Every screen in the room flickered. Every display changed simultaneously. The arguing stopped as 312 species turned to look at a human face that appeared on every surface. She was a woman in her 50s. With gray-streaked hair and dark eyes that held no warmth. She wore a uniform that Nathan did not recognize, decorated with symbols that meant nothing to the council's translators. Behind her, through a viewport, the lights of a massive fleet stretched into the distance. This is Admiral Patricia Lawson of the United Earth Defense Force, she said. Her voice was calm and measured, the voice of someone who had planned this moment carefully. We are contacting the Galactic Council to inform you of a change in our relationship. Varath stepped forward, trying to project authority. Admiral Lawson, the Council demands an explanation for your aggressive military buildup. Your actions constitute a violation of 17 treaties, and we have withdrawn from all Council treaties. Patricia interrupted. As of 18 months ago, humanity no longer considers itself bound by any agreements made with this organization. We have found another path. The chamber fell silent. You mocked us, Patricia continued. You dismissed us. You treated us as children, not worthy of sitting at your table. We could have accepted that. We could have waited 1,000 years, as you suggested, hoping for acceptance that would never come. She paused, and something that might have been a smile crossed her face. We chose differently. The transmission ended. The screens returned to normal, and in the void of space, the human fleet began to move. The first battle came 17 days after Admiral Lawson's transmission. High Counselor. Vareth had dispatched a Zin battle group to investigate the human expansion. 12 dreadnoughts, each one representing centuries of military development, each one capable of destroying a small moon. They were commanded by Fleet Master Torian, one of the most decorated officers in Zin history. Their mission was simple. Enter human space. Assess the situation. Remind the humans that the Council's patience had limits. They found the human vessel waiting for them at the edge of what the humans now called the Sovereign Boundary. Commander Samuel Price stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel, ironclad, and watched the Zin fleet approach on his tactical display. He was a young man, barely 30 years old, with calm eyes and steady hands. He had been chosen for this mission specifically because he did not frighten easily. 12 dreadnoughts, his tactical officer reported. Standard Zin formation. They are charging weapons. Samuel nodded. Expected. What is their time to engagement range? For minutes, at current approach speed, it's very good. Maintain position. Do not power up our weapons until I give the order. The bridge crew exchanged glances. They trusted their commander, but the situation seemed impossible. One ship against 12. The math did not favor them, no matter how advanced their technology might be. A communication request appeared on Samuel's console. He accepted it. Fleet Master Torin's face filled the screen. The Zin commander was enormous, even by the standards of his species, and his exoskeleton was decorated with the marks of 100 victories. Human vessel, Torin said, his mandibles clicking with barely concealed contempt. You have violated Council space with an unregistered warship. Power down your weapons immediately and prepare to be boarded. Your crew will be taken into custody pending trial for violations of the Galactic Accords. Samuel leaned back in his chair. Negative. Torin paused, clearly unused to being refused. I do not think you understand your situation. You are outnumbered 12-1. Your technology is inferior. Your species is barely capable of our technology, Samuel interrupted. Is approximately 300 years ahead of yours? The Zin commander stared at him. That is impossible. We reverse-engineered every piece of alien hardware we could acquire during our time in the Council. We studied your weapons, your shields, your propulsion systems. Then we improved upon them significantly. Samuel smiled slightly. It was not a pleasant expression. Fire solution calculated for all 12 vessels. Weapons locked. Torin laughed, that wet clicking sound that had haunted Ambassador Cole's nightmares 2 years ago. Your single ship cannot possibly threaten, Commander, the tactical officer interrupted. The Zin fleet has entered weapons range. Samuel did not hesitate. Fire. The ironclad's weapon systems activated in a cascade of controlled fury. 12 targeting solutions, calculated and locked in the seconds before the order came. 12 bursts of energy, each one precisely calibrated to exploit weaknesses in Zin. Shield technology that the Council did not know, humanity had discovered. The battle lasted 12 seconds. 12 Zin dreadnoughts, representing the pride of the most powerful military in the galaxy, came apart like paper boats in a hurricane. Their shields failed instantly. Their armor melted under concentrated fire. Their reactor cores breached in cascading explosions that lit up the void like artificial stars. The ironclad did not receive a single scratch. Samuel watched the debris expand on his tactical display. He felt nothing. No joy in the victory, no satisfaction in the destruction, only a cold certainty that this was just the beginning. Open a general broadcast frequency, he ordered. All Council vessels in this region should hear this. His communications officer complied. Channel open, Commander? Samuel spoke clearly, knowing that his words would be recorded and analyzed by dozens of species. This is Commander Samuel Price of the United Earth Defense Force. The sovereign boundary is now in effect. Any unauthorized entry into human space will be considered an act of war and will be met with appropriate force. This is your only warning. He cut the transmission and turned back to his crew. Set course for home. Best speed. News of the engagement spread through Council space faster than light itself could travel. The secure channels buzzed with encrypted transmissions as species tried to understand what had happened. The public networks filled with speculation and fear. 12 Zin dreadnoughts destroyed in seconds. By a single human ship. Emergency sessions were called on a dozen worlds. The great powers of the galaxy gathered their military advisors and demanded explanations. How had humanity developed such weapons? How had they hidden their capabilities for so long? What else were they hiding? In the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, the atmosphere was one of barely controlled panic. This changes nothing, Delegate Siren insisted, though her colors flickered with uncertainty. One battle does not make a war. The humans may have achieved a tactical surprise, but they cannot stand against the combined might of the Council. Can they not? Lord Mevin asked quietly. The ancient Eldari had been reviewing the battle data, and his expression was troubled. Look at the analysis. Their weapon systems are generations ahead of ours. Their shield technology renders our attacks ineffective. Their targeting solutions suggest predictive capabilities we did not know were possible. Then we must respond with overwhelming force, Vareth declared. Send every fleet we have. Crush them before they can expand further. And how many ships are you willing to lose? Dr. Lisa Hartman asked. She had been summoned to provide her expertise on human psychology, and she was not interested in softening her assessment. You saw what one vessel did to 12 dreadnoughts. The humans have a fleet of hundreds now. How many of you? Our ships will be destroyed before we can even reach their territory. The chamber fell silent, Lisa continued, her voice steady. I have studied humanity for years. I warned this council about what would happen if we pushed them too far. You did not listen. Now you face the consequences of your arrogance. Then what do you suggest? Vareth demanded. That we simply accept their defiance? That we allow them to challenge the order we have maintained for 60,000 years? I suggest, Lisa said, that you stop thinking of humanity as children to be disciplined. They are not throwing a tantrum. They are not seeking attention. They have made a calculated decision to separate themselves from the council and build their own future. The question is not how to punish them for that decision. The question is how to deal with the reality it has created. We could negotiate, Siren suggested reluctantly. Offer them better terms. Invite them back to the council with a more favorable position. Lisa shook her head. It is too late for that. They do not want your terms anymore. They do not want membership in your council. They want independence. True independence, with no obligations to any other species. That is unacceptable, Vareth said. The galactic order cannot function if species are allowed to simply opt out whenever they choose. Then perhaps, Lisa replied, the galactic order needs to change. The debate continued for hours, but no resolution was reached. The council was divided between those who wanted to attack, those who wanted to negotiate, and those who simply wanted to pretend the problem would go away on its own. Meanwhile, in the depths of human space, the Independence Initiative continued. New ships rolled out of orbital shipyards every week. New colonies were established in systems the Council had never bothered to claim. New technologies were developed, tested, and deployed with a speed that defied everything the galaxy knew about scientific progress. The reckoning had begun, and it was far from over. 5 years had passed since humanity abandoned the Galactic Council. The universe was a very different place now. The sovereign boundary had expanded to encompass nearly 200 star systems. Human colonies thrived on worlds that the Council had dismissed as uninhabitable, their populations growing rapidly as refugees from overcrowded Earth found new homes among the stars. Human ships patrolled trade routes that Council vessels now carefully avoided, their presence a constant reminder of how quickly the balance of power had shifted. The Council itself had changed as well, though not in ways that its leaders would have chosen. High Counselor Varath stood at his podium in the Great Hall. Looking out at an assembly that was barely half the size it had been 5 years ago, empty seats stretched across the chamber like missing teeth. Abandoned banners hung limp on walls that no longer felt quite so grand. The Gentari Collective had been the first to leave. They had formally requested an alliance with Earth 18 months ago, and they had not looked back since. Their departure had been a shock, but it was only the beginning. The minor species of the Outer Rim had formed their own coalition under human protection. They called themselves the Free Worlds Assembly, and they operated entirely outside the Council's authority. Their trade ships carried human goods to markets the Council could no longer reach. Their ambassadors spoke of freedom and equality in terms that made the great powers deeply uncomfortable. Even some Corvathi worlds had. begun quiet negotiations for trade agreements that bypassed council oversight entirely. They did not announce these arrangements publicly, but the rumors spread regardless. The Xin hegemony had lost 3 more fleet engagements against human forces, each defeat more humiliating than the last. They had withdrawn from the outer territories entirely, pulling their ships back to defensive positions around their core worlds. Fleetmaster Torin had been the first casualty of that initial battle, but he had not been the last. The Xin military machine, once the terror of the galaxy, now focused entirely on protecting what they already had, rather than expanding further. The Eldari. Dominion had simply stopped attending council sessions. Lord Mevin had died 2 years ago. His successors saw no point in participating in an organization that seemed increasingly irrelevant to their interests. Their generation ships continued their endless journeys between stars as they had for millions of years. But they no longer coordinated those journeys with the Council. Vareth looked at the empty seats and felt something he had never experienced before in his long life. He felt old. He felt tired. He felt afraid. A communication request appeared on his personal console. Human origin. He accepted it with trembling claws. Admiral Patricia Lawson's face appeared on his screen. She looked much the same as she had 5 years ago, perhaps a little grayer, perhaps a little more tired. But with the same steady eyes and confident bearing. Behind her, through a viewport, he could see a fleet of unprecedented size. Hundreds of vessels that made the ironclad look like a patrol boat. Ships that could have conquered the entire galaxy if humanity had chosen to use them that way. But they had not chosen conquest. That was the strangest thing of all. Humanity had the power to destroy the Council entirely, and they had simply chosen not to. "High Counselor," Patricia said. "Humanity has a message for the Galactic Council." Varath straightened, trying to project the dignity and authority he no longer felt. "We are prepared to discuss terms for your return to membership. Certain concessions could be arranged. Trade agreements more favorable to your interests. A seat on the Security Committee. Perhaps even we are not interested in returning," Patricia interrupted. Her voice was polite, but firm. "We did not contact you to negotiate our membership. We contacted you because we have decided to establish formal relations with individual council species. Those who treat with us fairly will find us to be generous partners. Those who cling to the old ways will simply be left behind." "You cannot simply ignore 60,000 years of galactic order," Vareth protested. "We are not ignoring it," Patricia replied. "We are replacing it. The Council had its chance to include humanity as equals. You chose to laugh instead. Now we are building something better. Something that does not require young species to beg for scraps from ancient civilizations that forgot what it means to grow." She leaned forward slightly, and for a moment, Vareth saw something in her eyes that he had not expected. Not anger. Not hatred. Something more like pity. "Your council laughed at us," she said. "Dismissed us. Humiliated us in front of the entire galaxy. We could have accepted it. We could have waited 1,000 years, as you suggested, hoping for acceptance that might never come. Instead," Vareth asked, though he already knew the answer. "Instead, we decided that if we were not welcome at your table, we would build our own. And now, every species that ever felt the way we did has a place to sit." Vareth watched the human fleet on her display. Ships moving in perfect formation, heading toward different regions of space. Different potential allies. Different nails in the coffin of Council supremacy. "What do you want from us?" he asked. His voice was barely above a whisper. Admiral Patricia Lawson smiled. It was not a cruel smile or a triumphant one. It was the smile of someone who had made peace with a long and difficult journey and who no longer needed anything from those who had tried to stop her. "Nothing," she said. "Absolutely nothing. And I think that terrifies you more than anything else we could have demanded." The transmission ended. Vareth stood alone in the great hall, surrounded by empty seats and fading banners. The silence pressed against him like a physical weight. For 60,000 years, this chamber had been the center of galactic civilization. Decisions made here had shaped the fate of billions of beings across thousands of worlds. Now, It was just a room. A very large, a very empty room where old beings gathered to pretend they still mattered. He thought about the young human ambassador who had stood at the podium 5 years ago, asking for nothing more than fair treatment. He thought about how easily they had dismissed him, how casually they had laughed at his concerns. He thought about the warning Ambassador Cole had given before he left. "We will remember this day," humanity had remembered. And in their remembering, they had changed everything. The greatest revenge, Baroth finally understood, was not destruction. It was not conquest. It was not war or punishment or pain. The greatest revenge was irrelevance. It was building something so successful, so appealing, so fundamentally better than what came before. The old order simply ceased to matter. The Galactic Council had ruled the galaxy for 60,000 years. They had believed that rule would last forever. They had been wrong. Somewhere in the depths of human space, in a system that the Council had once dismissed as worthless, Ambassador Daniel Cole watched the stars from the observation deck of a human orbital station. He was older now, his hair completely gray, his face lined with years of work and worry, but he was smiling. He had kept his promise. Humanity had remembered, and now the whole galaxy knew what happened when you laughed at the wrong species. The universe stretched out before him, vast and full of possibility. Humanity's place in it was no longer a question. They had earned it themselves, with their own hands. Through their own determination, they would never need permission from anyone again. And that, in the end, was all they had ever wanted.